Hello everybody, how are you doing today? I hope you're doing well. I wanted today to talk about identity, something that's been on my mind a bit over the last few days, and I did touch a little bit upon it in the video regarding my kind of somewhat contradictory and odd relationship with the church. But it's a strange thing, identity really. It's kind of malleable to some extent. It's shaped by experiences, it's shaped by our culture and our upbringing, the things that we see around us, the experiences we have when we're in our youth, our formative years. And I think for the most part, I would say the vast majority of people have an evolving sense of identity, a changing identity over time. As you go through the different phases of life, you kind of take on a little bit of a different identity. There are some things that kind of stay with you as the years go on, but there are certainly a lot of things that change. But I was just thinking yesterday about, imagine if you're somebody that doesn't feel a sense of identity anymore, or doesn't, when you kind of reach a point in life where you no longer recognize who you are, no longer quite understand who you are, what you are anymore. And I think the reason I wanted to talk about this was because I suppose it's because I've kind of been feeling like that lately. And it was also because I've been listening to a lot of these kind of like post-punk type kind of artists, and it just got me thinking about identity and how a lot of people kind of wear their identity. They project, they reach out for others to validate it. People reach out to others to see if it's working. See if it's to kind of like test out whether the things that they're believing, they support, they like, are the same things that other people like. It's the sense of wanting to belong to something, and I think that's what a lot of it boils down to in the end. It's this. I think a lot of it's born out of deep insecurities and resentment, and an ongoing battle within oneself in terms of in terms of their own sort of like idea of what they might be or what they're not, or the things that they don't seem to connect to. I think if you ask the average person, they'd be able to tell you about their personality, their character, but they might not be able to tell you what their identity is. They might not be able to give you a clear answer as to who really are you. What are you? And I think there's a lot of people out there with conflicting versions of themselves, with various delusional sort of like idealistic kind of just variations of themselves, and they don't know which one is the real one. And you see this all the time when people move across into different genres of music. They no longer feel like they identify with things, and this can happen. It's not just with music; it's with fashion. It's with the things that people watch, and so people find themselves moving on to different things because their identity changes over time, or they feel like it does. I think sometimes we're just going through phases where we kind of get bored with certain things, and we just need a break from overexposure to certain stimuli, I suppose. But then there are also periods in life where you do require real change. You do, I suppose, need to evolve your sense of who you are. You do need to evolve in ways that you think are more constructive and beneficial for you in the long run. I think a lot of us get stuck in patterns of familiarity and comfort, whether that's with foods that we eat, the types of music that we listen to, the types of videos we watch online, the types of people we like to be around. And it's good to have a grounding in life. It's good to have that stability of things that we are familiar with and we know are non-threatening, but that's essentially what it comes down to, I think. But at the same time, those things are also the things that hold us back. They are the things that keep us stuck in many ways. It's because it's comforting, because it's easy, because it becomes a habit, and so we end up living lives of habits, of predictability and comforting but very unfulfilling lives, I would say. Not necessarily bad lives, but just not particularly great lives. Just to point something out, the mat that you can see there on the floor, these two mats here, they're for the dogs, because sometimes when they come in the house, they slide across the floor and it can hurt their paws. So there's Hem. She likes to sleep on that chair for some reason. She's very sweet. It's strange, isn't it? Identity. It's only something that bothers humans. It's only something that seems to matter to us. When was the last time you saw a dog? Walking into a store and buying something to make it feel better about how it feels in itself, and its relationship to other people, and its sense of belonging, and its own kind of tribe, and I think that's essentially what a lot of it comes down to. In my opinion, is that we spend our life trying to find a certain tribe, trying to find our type of humans. The people that we feel are right for us, we feel are empowering, that we feel that we connect to on different levels that we don't, but in certain ways we don't usually connect with the average person. And sometimes that can be positive, and obviously sometimes that can kind of perpetuate the cycle of comfort as well, because sometimes it's sometimes, as much as I hate to say, it's better to be around. Sometimes it's important to have a bit of discomfort in life. It's important to have a bit of challenge. It's important to just sometimes just to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, because that can push you to do new things. And in my life, I've done things that I never thought I would do. Partly it was born out of necessity and pressure, I admit. But also part of it was because I wanted to push myself. I've done a few things, like I ran a half marathon. I've finished my degree and got married. I didn't think that would ever happen, much as it's not perfect. But I travelled a little bit, and I've had a few partners and over the years, and I've done quite a few things, and from an artistic point of view, I've made a lot of mixes, DJ mixes, and made some very good stuff for my YouTube channel, I think, as well. But, you know, I admit that some of it's a bit more of a niche kind of thing, but so it's not like I've done nothing in my life. But I suppose coming back to the topic at hand of identity, I think in some way that is a representation of my identity, or who I, perhaps maybe the truth of it, the darker truth is who I want to project myself to be in the world, I suppose. That's how I want people to see me, rather than you know, that is not an accurate representation of who I am as an entire individual. But it's certainly a part of who I am. It's a representation of a part of who I am. You know, it's an interpretation of myself, I suppose, in a way. Just as any kind of art is a bit of a. It's an expression, isn't it? It's an expression of a part of yourself. It's an expression of your desires and fears and hopes, and, you know, your struggles in life, your existential crises, you know, your identity issues, your sadness, your loneliness. You seek an expression, a representation of the things that you would like to have, you would like to belong to, that you don't. It's sort of, you know, creating a better world that, because of that it doesn't exist, creating an idealized sort of landscape, whether that's through music or poetry or theatre or film, you know, even gaming, really. And so we all cling on to these different things for our lives. We all collect things as we go along. You know, we get interested in things in our late childhood into our teens, and we start to kind of like collectivize based on our shared interests, and I suppose like that's really, you know, for many people where their identity starts to sprout, you know, starts to develop. And while I certainly did have some of that, I think in many ways I always felt a bit more of a loner, really. As much as I liked my friends, David, Ashley, Raymond, etc., even my female friends to some extent, you know, I liked spending time with them at that time. But I think ultimately, I think I preferred being by myself more than being around those people. I always felt that I was just being judged all the time. So for me, I just felt that I knew that it was a good thing to to bond with other people, because it develops, you know, social skills and communication skills. But at the same time, I suppose part of me kind of resented it, that I felt that well, in hindsight anyway, you know, I kind of feel like I resented it a little bit. Because it's like, that's not really who I was. And so I was trying to kind of like push myself to be something that I wasn't. And, you know, I was so desperate to fit in as this kind of functionally autistic, kind of ADHD ridden, you know, kind of slightly eccentric, introverted, you know, neurodivergent kid, which is exactly what I was. And obviously I didn't realise that stuff at the time. I just thought that was just who I was. I didn't realise what the extent of my issues were, and just how much, looking back, like, I just didn't realise how much was really going on with me. I really didn't. And I don't mean that as in some, like, victimhood sort of anger. I'm not trying to, like, paint it out to be some as oh, poor me, blah blah blah. I don't mean like that. I just mean that in the sense of I didn't really truly understand. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't, or what sometimes you're told is wrong with you. There's something wrong with you, David. There's something you've got a screw loose. You this. And they were right. I did have something wrong with me, but I was never officially diagnosed with anything. That's the thing. It's like I didn't know about neurodivergency. I didn't know that that was even a thing. Like, I don't even know if it was labelled as a thing back then. I'm not sure, but we're talking 30 years ago here, so I'm not, or even if it was, it probably wasn't taken quite as seriously as it is today. And I think, if I'm honest with you, I've kind of, like, over the last sort of 15 years, I suppose part of my identity has kind of been connected to that stuff, in a sense. It's that I am a little bit strange sometimes. I'm a little bit... I'm just misunderstood, I think. People don't quite understand me. They don't quite get the depth of me in some ways sometimes, and that's okay. And I understand, people have their own perceptions of me, and they have their own judgments, their own opinions, just like I do with other people. So, and that's okay. I understand that that's how we are as a species, and in many ways it serves as well to be like that. But I think it's just sometimes, I think a lot of criticism tends to come from people who they themselves don't really know who they are. So I think sometimes, looking back on a lot of things, on bullying, and I don't want to bring all that stuff up to talk about it more times than I care to count already now. But this stuff that happened during my childhood, my adolescence years, I can't. I'm not going to sit here and say that I forgive those people, because I would be being dishonest. But I understand it a bit better now. I understand that they were struggling with their own identity. They were struggling with peer pressure. They were trying to fit in and, not become bullied themselves. And so I get it. But at the same time, it's not like they didn't know what they were doing. It's like they did know what they were doing wasn't the right thing to do. So at the same time as I understand how difficult it is to navigate all that stuff, certainly now as an adult I do. As much as I can kind of sort of sympathise with them to a certain extent, people do make choices, and I certainly wasn't like them, and so, and I think it's just, I think, really playground schools are basically kind of, it's nature working itself out, I suppose, in a way. It's the predator types sniffing out the prey, it's fight or flight, it's adapt and survive, just in a more civilized way, and say civilized, in a more sort of social, in a more sort of acceptable way, really, just without people dying and fighting over resources, although that's in some cases that does happen as well. But when you think about it, it's like, you're right. As much as your teenage years are the thing that kind of propels your identity forward, I think the seeds of it really develop when you're in your sort of mid to late childhood, really. So by that, I'm talking about sort of 5 years old up until about, I'd say, really your identity, or your sense of potential of an identity is formed somewhere along the lines of, I would say, between the years of about 5 and probably somewhere like 20, 21, somewhere around there, I reckon, for the most part. Of course, things change, as I've already said, as you get older and you mature more, and I guess you just over time you kind of grow off, just kind of things kind of, you go out of, you just kind of lose touch with certain things, and you just grow out of certain hobbies and certain interests. And your tastes change, your priorities change as you get older, because obviously your mind changes and your body's changing, your life circumstances change. And obviously, you don't quite have the same level of resilience and energy you once had, so things change along those ways as well. So, it's a difficult thing, identity, and some people feel that their identity is connected to their external kind of elements of themselves, whether that's with like makeup, or the types of makeup, or the specific style of makeup you use, whether that's the types of clothing you wear, whether that's the places that you hang out in, whether that's the things that you talk about with your closest friends, whether it's partaking in drugs, alcohol, partying, clubbing, all these things, they're all parts of one's identity, but they're also, they are finite. They tend to transition to other things, and you tend to replace certain parts of your identity with other things, or you kind of overcompensate with things you look for other things to replace things that you used to be into. So, in my situation regarding music, it might be something like being interested in sort of like fast-paced, energetic music, and then sort of being sort of looking for that in some other form, whether that's in high energy sport maybe, or whether that's in post-punk type social commentary based kind of like, political commentary based, or provocative, like a bit out there kind of like indie sort of post-punk type stuff. And I think that's what a lot of us do. We try and like hang on to things, but then over time, we just kind of fall out of love with things, just as we do in relationships and with friendships. We as we grow older, as I said, circumstances change, and we start to kind of lose, I think, a sense of who we are, because a lot of the things that we built up were convenient and attached to a part of ourselves, a specific part of our life that either no longer exists, or is swiftly decaying, or is dying very quickly. And we recognise that, we feel that in ourselves. We feel that there are certain things in us that are changing, that we feel parts of ourselves that want to move on. And this is why people end up having a midlife crisis, because basically people no longer connect with the things they used to, and so they go searching for something to give them a new sense, and sort of a refreshed version of themselves, a refreshed kind of sense of, this is who I am now, this is me. And so it doesn't surprise me when some people get to midlife and they have a sex change, or they become impulsive with regards to womanizing, gambling, drugs, abusing drugs and alcohol, wearing clothes that clearly don't fit them or don't really suit their overall looks, or people start having plastic surgery, or people just start kind of wanting to hang around with younger people. It's because they don't. Partly it's because they're not happy with who they are in the present, but it's also because they feel disconnected from the past. They don't feel like they can carry on living in a way that they don't identify with anymore. So identity is not even so much of it sort of an intrinsic kind of deeply rooted part of who we are. It's more of our identity a lot of the time is associated with external things. It's connected to stimuli. It's connected to the way that we project ourselves out into the world, rather than it being. It's more about. I think a lot of it's about attention, validation, fighting off insecurities, fighting off conflicting versions of ourselves, and I think a lot of it's down to coping. Really, it's a lot of it. I think a lot of it's coping mechanisms. We don't realise we become attached to things as time goes on, especially when we're young and impressionable. We're still at a point in our lives where it's easy to fall into certain traps, the trappings of culture and society, and the expectations of, or the sort of perceived expectations upon us as young people. We should be doing this, we should be doing that. Like I have to connect with something. I have to feel like I'm part of some, movement. I have to feel some sense of importance and moral righteousness, and moral superiority. My generation's the best there's ever been. My generation's got something to offer. My generation is different from the last, but really, a lot of the time, a lot of it's just variations of what's already been before. It's just a modern take on it. Those people, the young people of the 1920s, probably thought that they were special and unique, and just as the young people of today think they are. And the next few generations of however long human species have got left on the planet will probably think that they are the next best thing. And in some ways, I suppose, it's just sort of they are, because they're growing up in a more modernized technological world, and so in some way, yes, it's true, they are kind of making history to an extent, but a lot of it's just born out of the same kind of human basic instincts and need for. Really, a lot of it's down to it's a need to feel connected. It's a need for companionship. It's a need for understanding and wanting to feel like other people care and other people understand what we're going through, understanding what we're feeling, and you can think about things like the MTV generation and the hippie movement, rock and roll, sort of the art movements of the early 20th century, certain political movements. A lot of it's down to youth culture and this sense of sort of like breaking down barriers and proving oneself. We've got something to offer. We've got something to say. We are the generation of change. We are the generation of radical ideas and provocative art and fashion and music, etc. That's nothing new, really. I mean, that's been going on for a very long time, probably centuries, actually. But so, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it just kind of just annoys me that you see so many young people on like TikTok and YouTube, and they think that they're God's gifts to the world, and what they don't realise is they're just being moulded and manipulated and marketed and used as a target audience to sell shit. You know, they just become part of the same old system that's always been there. Find, you know, the most vulnerable, most impressionable people, most gullible minded, you know, people that still kind of working out what they are in life or where they're at. But I think when we have people who don't really know who they are, or never really truly know who they are, and I felt like that quite a lot of times in my life, to be honest, then I think then you start to kind of become a bit of alone, because people don't, I don't think, because sometimes it's hard to express yourself, sometimes it's hard to be articulate in a way that people would empathise with, and people would respect you for because people respect things that they see in themselves, they respect things that they align with, they respect things that they've worked hard to achieve, or just things that they themselves are. And so if you don't meet certain people's expectations, it doesn't matter what you say, what behaviours you exhibit, you know, what you do for people, you know, people just won't like you. And you know, there's a lot of this sort of black pill stuff online, and this whole movement of, you know, sort of critiquing women, and you know, the ills of the dating world and the ills of capitalism, and I exactly agree that there's certainly, you know, a multitude of problems when it comes to, and really a lot of unfairness, I think, and a lot of hypocrisy and double standards with regards to the treatment of men by women, and just society in general, and all of the kind of really shitty parts about being a man in today's world. But I suppose it, as much as I do align with it in some respects, it is again, it's a kind of sense, it's that thing of identity, isn't it? You know, some people align more with this pill than others, and other people align more with another pill, and you know, you only have to look through the average person's YouTube feed or their subscriptions to see what they feel their sense of identity is. You know, whether it's with politics, whether it's with gaming channels, whether it's with social commentary stuff, news. I don't know, you know, whatever. Just so I think there's a lot of insecurities in this world. You know, we all have them, but it's. I think that a lot of the time we express our insecurities through this highly malleable thing called identity. You know, it's something that's, you know, we like to think that this is just who we are, who we naturally are as people, and I think I don't often think that's true. It's things that's been moulded, and because we've been moulded in a certain way by our parents, our siblings, school life, our friends, maybe some mentors along the way, some role models or people we looked up to. You know, we've all been shaped and moulded. And a lot of the time we don't realise the extent of that. You know, how many things that we watched on TV as kids had subliminal message in it, and had some impact on us in some way or other? How many experiences did we have with women or with our close friends that impacted our sense of identity or impacted our insecurities, our fears? How many issues at school, teachers or not feeling adequate enough to set subjects had an impact on us, or not getting the right grades, or just general things in life, just sometimes random stuff that happens that could have a bit of an impact on us and could knock our confidence. And I think really a lot of the time our self-worth is attached to our identity as well. And I think we just have to be very careful that we're not that our self-worth doesn't become superficial and a bit shallow. I think it's very easy to do that. Our identity isn't. Our identity shouldn't just be the way we feel. It should be the way that we live. It should be our principles, our values, our beliefs. Really, that's what our identity should be. But I find, especially with younger people, that isn't the case. That it's more about a projection of an idealized idea or perception or vision of themselves rather than who they really are. That's why some people become emos, some people become goths, some people become rockers, some people become punks, or some people get involved with religion, some people get involved with politics, some people get involved with the arts. And so I just think we just have to be very careful about that stuff. As a kid, I was deeply insecure and shy in school, and I was always going red. The teacher kind of picked me out during classes and for something or other, I used to get really embarrassed and used to get hung up about stuff like that. And I was kind of like that for a lot of my teens, really. I just always kind of felt like I was the odd one out, and that I suppose, looking back on it now, some 20 odd years later, I think that really shaped my need for solitude, and obviously with all of the name calling and all that crap, it just pushed me into isolation. It pushed me into it just made me feel like I'm not wanted here. As far as I was concerned, I don't belong here. I don't fit in here. They don't like me. I don't like them, for the most part. And I think looking back, the fact that most of the people that I hung around with, in some way or other, were kind of kind of mentalists in one form or another. They were all a bit kind of wacky and just kind of probably a bit on the autistic or mental health spectrum in one form or another. I think all of them probably had some kind of everyone I was ever friends with, probably. Maybe I think I tended to find more comfort being around females, I suppose, than I did with guys as a kid. As I got into my teens, my later teens, I kind of was a bit more kind of comfortable in myself, especially towards my 20s. And then as I got into my early 20s, I was a bit more kind of confident and comfortable in my own skin. But I think the reason for that was because I was young and I looked good then. I was at the peak of my physical attractiveness, and as far as I'm concerned anyway, and my fitness was at its peak then, and life was, generally speaking, kind of going pretty good for me in many ways. And, I was with someone, I had a job, I was earning, relatively good money, I suppose, and so things seemed to be going right for me. And then slowly, as time went on in my 20s, and I just kind of started to feel a sense of like, I just felt like I didn't really know who I was anymore. I didn't feel like and I think part of it is because I didn't build any new hobbies. I didn't build enough resilience to life, and I didn't try to find new things to connect with. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the disillusionment and the depletion of my self-worth came in. And as a result of all that stuff, I think I just reached a point where, as much as I had a lot to say about a lot of things, and I do, and probably always will do, but I didn't really feel like I was anybody. I didn't really feel like I didn't even really think I was a person anymore. I didn't recognize a sense of identity. I didn't even really truly recognize a personality in me anymore. And I think that all of that stuff together resulted in a point where I just kind of gave up. I couldn't see the point in continuing with anything anymore. I didn't see the point of bothering to get up anymore and trying. I just gave in. I just collapsed under my own weight of insecurities and apathy, and I just couldn't see the point anymore. I just thought, well, it's like every time I do something, I give in after a while. And so I just thought, well, there's just no point, is there? There's just no point in bothering to even start. And that just becomes a perpetual cycle of just apathy and self-inflicted pain, really, misery and depression, and it doesn't help you. It doesn't do you any good. And so at some point you have to reach a stage where you say, look, I have to build something, climb myself out of this pit of desperation and self-pity and apathy, and build something of an identity for myself again. If it is the case that all of your mental health issues are down to you kind of shedding off a sense of identity, then you have to build a new one. You have to build something new for yourself. Just as, if you don't like the house you're staying in, for whatever reason it's falling apart, you have two choices, don't you? You either fix it as best as you can, or you try and find something new, find a new place. And I think that's kind of where I feel like I'm at now in life. I feel like I'm at a point now where I know now this is the time where I've got to start building again. I have to start trying to slowly, progressively sort of build my confidence up again, because I think that's what happened. I lost all confidence. I lost all self-esteem. I lost all my self-worth and I just didn't have any resilience anymore. I just couldn't cope. I couldn't deal with the world anymore. And so I just gave up. I gave in. I just accepted my flaws, basically. I just threw in the towel. I just became defeatist. And before you know it, a year's gone by, 2-3 years have gone by, and you've done nothing. You've changed nothing. You've become nothing. You've evolved into nothing. You haven't matured really. I was looking back this morning through some stuff on Facebook, and I'm still sharing some of that stuff from 3 years ago. It's like I haven't changed. I haven't done anything. And so I think now that I'm in my mid-30s, there is this sense of I've got to change. I've got to get to a point where I recognize something in the mirror. I need something to give me a reason to get up and stay motivated. And I think that's what it was. Is I didn't feel like there was anything to motivate me anymore. I wasn't motivated just by my own desires to improve. Like I think throughout my entire life, I've always clung on to some external thing to give me a sense of motivation. And so it was always like, I think in many ways my identity of my 20s was, a lot of it was built out of the desire to accommodate other people's expectations, or accommodate other people's wants for me, including my wife, including my ex-partner. I think I didn't really think I was, a lot of the time, doing what I really wanted to do. I just was doing what I felt was expected of me, what I felt was gonna reduce the amount of tension, was gonna reduce the potential of arguments, rather than just doing things because I genuinely wanted to do them. And I think if nothing else, by the time you get into your 30s, you should be at a place where you say to yourself, look, you have two choices. You either stay in the pit of misery that you're at in life, or you find something, somewhere, somehow, some way to get up again and say, fuck it, I'm going to fucking stand up and do something. I'm not going to become a victim. I'm not going to become a pathetic little weasel and just give in for the rest of my life. I've had long enough to fucking sit on the couch and make all the excuses up under the sun why I couldn't make a change and why I couldn't bring myself to a point where I could make some positive changes. My past proves that I am capable of doing things, as I said at the start of the video. So that proves to me I do have it in me. So something along the way snapped in me, and I don't know what happened to me, but just along the way I just became really unmotivated, just really lazy, I just completely gave up on life. Completely just gave in on it, on things that, I'm not talking, it's not like I've I just ended up with heroin or crack or something. Or I somehow, blew all my money away on gambling, or somehow I, just gave up because I was, I don't know what happened to me really. I don't know, but something serious went severely wrong a lot. Something has gone very wrong over the last 10 years of my life, that's for sure. And certainly since the pandemic. Some things have just gone very, very sour in my approach to life, my attitude towards it, and towards other people. And I just became really negative, really pessimistic, really apathetic, really bogged down with just about everything and anything. And and I think part of it, honestly, if I'm being honest with you, a lot of it was just the shit that I was seeing online. A lot of it was just the media and just this constant bombardment of just everything just seems to just seem to be getting worse and worse. And now I see a little bit of hope on the horizon for change, for the potential of positive change, certainly in my own country and certainly in America. Whether you like Trump or not, you can't deny that some things are certainly now better under Trump than they were under Biden, and he's certainly a lot more articulate and confident and bolder of a leader than Biden ever was. But I'll put the politics aside for a moment. So I think I think for the first time in years, if I'm being honest with you, I feel a sense of hope again. I feel a sense of, and I don't know where that's come from. I think some of it's just through just endless mental suffering, that I've just gone through so much of it that I just don't want to go through any more of it. And the way to at least try and manage some of it is through being resilient, is through getting up and saying, okay, I can't change the world. I can't make everything better for everybody. I can't even make everything better for myself. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try and do what I can to make my life better. I'm going to try and do what I can to deal with my mental health problems as best as I can, Maybe I will have to live with it for the rest of my life, but maybe at least I can say that I tried. At least I can say I got up off my ass. I made an effort to try and do something, rather than just sitting around all day doing nothing, wasting time. I've just spent the last 9 months of my life doing fuck all, like literally fucking nothing, like nothing. I've done nothing over the last 9 months of my life. All I've done is just sit on my ass, stare at my phone, stare at the computer. I've achieved nothing. I've done fucking nothing this year. I've done nothing. And that's my fault, and I accept it. I made the choice to fuck off a lot of my work. And there were reasons for that. But again, I made that decision. I made the decision to stop exercising. I made the decision to cut off a lot of contact with a lot of people. That's on me. That's important. I think, and I think in effect that should be the time where you finally say to yourself, at some point you have to reach such a low where you just say to yourself, you know what, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I don't have to live like this. I can make a change. I can be motivated. I can do things. I can progress. I can become something more of myself. I can create a new version of myself, a new identity, if you will. But it starts with you. It starts with you I think in the end you have to be ready for it. You have to. I think you need to go through that misery. You need to go through that pain. You need to go through that suffering to such an extent where you finally reach rock bottom and you say, you know what? I don't want to fucking feel like this no more. I'm fucking sick of this shit. I'm sick and fucking tired of waking up feeling fucking miserable for the next God knows how many hours, going to sleep fucking unhappy, it affecting my fucking relationship with my family, affecting my relationships with my partner. And you wonder why you push people away. People don't want to talk to him. Well, that's why. And you don't realise that other people are going through their own fucking identity crises and existential shit. You don't realise what other, to the extent of what other people are going through. It's easy to just sit here and dwell in your own self-pity and I'm not saying that there isn't justification for you to be depressed to some extent. I'm not saying there isn't justification for you to be angry, frustrated, and bitter and resentful, but I think there comes a point where you have to funnel that stuff. You have to push that stuff into something that's more productive than just sitting around and just crying to yourself all fucking day long. You know what I mean? It's like that's no way to live. That isn't a life. That is not a way to live your life. You've got to find something better than that. It's not about being positive. All that positive bullshit is just empty platitudes and it's just shallow advice. It doesn't mean anything. That's why I don't believe in all that shit. But I do think that there is a better way for you to live your life. But you have to be first willing to accept that, at least to some extent, it is your fault. It is partly your fault. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that there aren't issues with the world around us, indirectly or directly. I'm not saying that there aren't parts of our societies that fucking suck ass, parts of the way that things just are accepted that are just immoral or unethical or wrong or just fucked. Of course there are. But if you want to feel something within yourself again, it's not even something about identity, it's about feeling something again within yourself. Some flame, some passion, some spark, some fucking drive within yourself. It starts by getting up and saying to yourself, you know what, I fucked up. I made my life into what it is. It's my fault. Yes, all that other shit played a part in it, but at the end of the day, I made the decision. Nobody forced me to make the shitty life choices I made. Nobody. I made those choices. Me. It's my fault. It's my fault that I have the life that I have. Nobody else's. Because when you admit that to yourself, you're taking accountability and you're saying, right, I can change them. Because when you say to yourself you can't change, then that's just feeding into it. It becomes a feedback loop. It becomes, you start to believe it. The more times you tell those things to yourself, the more you convince yourself that those things are true. And so then it becomes a cycle of, then you become apathetic, and then that's when you give up. Because you've persuaded yourself, you've convinced yourself that the things that you believe, the things that you say to yourself are all true. And even if they are to some, even if there is truth in some of it, a bit of truth in the things that you say to yourself, the things that you think, that still doesn't mean that you're not capable of a better version of yourself than you currently are. Doesn't mean that you can't become something more than you are. That's what we should all be trying to aim towards, being something, the next model of ourselves, Now forget the identity of your teens, forget the identity of your 20s, that shit's gone. If you're of my age, it's like, even if you're in your late 20s, fucking forget that shit. That's gone. It's over with. Move on, man. Move on. Live in the present. Those people in your past, those people you were with, the friends, they don't care about you anymore. They're not interested for the most part. They've moved on. They've got new identities now. Most of them are probably parents and bogged down in the careers and whatever, all that crap, and that's up to them. That's their sense of identity. That's their sense of importance in the world, whether you agree with it or not, but whatever. And you have to find what you want to be, now at this point in your life. It's not about the future, unless you're aiming for something long term. But it's about now. It's about getting up. Somehow at some point you've just got to drag yourself up. You've got to drag yourself off the fucking sofa. You've got to drag your ass out of that bed. It's like getting up at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes you just say to yourself, I've got to do this. I've got to find some discipline. I've got to find a purpose to fucking get up and do something. You've got to start being a bit aggressive with yourself, Not punishing yourself, but being fucking strict and saying, you know what, David? You need to get your fucking ass in gear, man. Time's running out. You're not getting any younger. You've got to get up and fight. Fight for yourself. Fight for something you believe in. Fight for something that's worthwhile. Fight for something that's beneficial for you, even if it's painful, even if it's hard. That's what a real man is, in my opinion. Somebody that does that. Someone that against all the fucking odds, against all the difficulties, still gets up and fights. After all that adversity, all those troubles, all the struggles, all of those periods of being broken and giving in. But you still at some point stand up and get up and fight again. That's what it's about. And if nothing else, that's what your identity should be. That's how other people should see you, as someone that got up and kept fighting and didn't give in. We can all give in. I've given in more times in my life than I care to admit. Trust me. Far too many times. But you know what? At some point, I always got back up again and kept trying. I never completely gave up until recently. I never completely gave up. But something yesterday, I don't know, just something triggered me, man. And I don't know, I just felt like this outpouring of fucking grief for some reason. And it just made me realise, that I've got to change. Something's got to fucking change. My subconscious mind was just exploding. It was just like, David, you've got to do something. You have to change. You have to do it. You can see clearly there's some trauma going on in you. There's clearly some serious emotional baggage there. You've got to deal with that shit, man. Whether that's through the gym, whether that's through your job, career, educational aim, I don't know, whatever it is, somehow, some way, you've got to work on that. You've got to find some way of managing that stuff and dealing with it. Because you aren't going to deal with it by sitting on your ass and doing nothing. That's what I realised. That's what I think it's really about in the end. Because all of that stuff is your identity as well, all of that shit. All your hang-ups, all your insecurities, all your baggage, all your trauma, all your mistakes, all your regrets, all your guilt, it's all part of who you are. But you have to use that stuff in a way that's fucking useful for you in some way. It's easy to just sit there and fucking down a couple of bottles of vodka, or sit on the console for the next 4 or 5 hours and do nothing and pretend everything's okay and the life's wonderful and I'm happy. But you're not. All you're doing is you're just delaying the inevitable. You're just living in denial. You're just being delusional. It doesn't work. When all you're going to do in the end is just create even more apathy, even more misery for yourself, even more of an identity crisis as time goes on, as you get older. And more existential questions will pop up, and you'll just become a fucking wreck of a man. You'll become a shadow of who you used to be. You'll become a shell. You'll just look at yourself in the mirror and you'll be just fucking disgusted by what you see. Not literally by your body, or that'll be part of it, because you're fucking piled on weight because you don't care about yourself anymore. Because that's what happens. When you no longer when you no longer care, when you no longer feel like you've got anything to say or offer the world, then you just give in. You give up. And everything feeds into each other. So somehow you've got to break that cycle. And that's what I realised yesterday, is that something somewhere along the line is perpetuating that cycle of despair, frustration, of an existential crisis, of an identity crisis, of depression. And I'm doing something along the lines that's perpetuating it. And I've got to find something that disconnects it somewhere. Something that breaks that cycle, that habit, this habitual lifestyle that I've had for so long now. And part of that is exercising, probably. Part of it is getting a new job. Part of it is doing some traveling again at some point. And a part of it is learning some new stuff, trying to push myself, challenging myself to do something new, try something new, get out of my comfort zone. That's what I think, for me, I need to do for myself to improve, to feel more content and happy with myself as I go further on in life. Because I can't continue to live in the way that I currently am. I just can't. I just fucking can't, man. I just can't. I can't. Something's got to give. Something's got to change. And if you don't, it'll be September 2026, and you'll be still fucking sitting here doing nothing, whinging and moaning and complaining. And so that's okay. There's nothing wrong in that. But it's better to change something, It's better to just say, have your fucking whinging, have your moment of anger and frustration. That's okay, it's fine. Get it out. Get it out of yourself. Stop holding everything in. And that's what, yesterday, I realised, is that I'm just trying to hold too much shit in all the time. Holding too much suppressed emotions and baggage and frustration with everything and everyone. And it just at some point, I'm telling you, it'll just fucking flow out of you. It'll just snap, your brain will just snap. It's like an elastic band. It'll just fucking snap at you at some point. It'll just say, have some of this, because I can't fucking take it anymore. And I'm sorry for swearing, but this is just, I'm just talking from my heart here, man. Your identity matters, because that in many ways is attached to your sense of comfort and confidence, your self-esteem, the way you project yourself out into the world, your assertiveness or lack of it, your ability to be decisive about things, your ability to be resilient, motivated, reliant, responsible, accountable. It all matters. It's all connected. Don't fucking give up on life, man. I'm telling you, you will regret it. You will fucking regret it, I'm telling you. If you don't make a change, you'll 10, 20 years down the line, you're like, I'm telling you don't want to live like that. It's not pleasant. Trust me, I've been through some shit. And I can tell you, it's not a nice place to find yourself at 35, with no money, no real job, and just being incredibly miserable a lot of the time, quite frankly. It's not a nice place to be. And so, my advice to you is to if you're still in your 20s, or even if you're not, but especially if you're in your 20s, start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and testing yourself, pushing yourself, challenging yourself, doing new things. Just get out there and fucking live your life, man, because it's fucking quick. It really is. It really is. It feels like 5 minutes ago since I was in my early 20s. I'm fast approaching the big 40. Before I know it, I'll be 50 and then 60, and I'll be fucking an old man before I know it. Because you think in your 20s, you think you've got all your life ahead of you, and you think you're invincible, and yeah, in your head you are at that time, and to some extent, physically you are at that time, but as life goes on, life starts kicking in the ass and starts telling you to wake the fuck up and smell the coffee, and because your fucking health starts fading a little bit, your physical fitness starts to decline. You start piling on the weight very easily, and obviously your metabolism's slowing down, your testosterone's depleting as you're getting older. Not much every year, but it is declining every year, and that all can ruin you as a man. It can absolutely obliterate your. It just destroys you if you're not careful. It just fucking ruins you. So don't let it, don't get to that point where you become so apathetic that you just completely just give in altogether, and every area of your life you just stop caring, and you don't give a fuck anymore. It's not a healthy place to be, mentally speaking, emotionally, just in general. And if you've already got mental health issues anyway, all you're doing is you're just feeding into it and making it worse. You're just giving it fuel. So somewhere along the line, you've got to say to yourself, right, well, how do I feed it something that gives me some sense of meaning, purpose and drive and positivity and motivation to continue to go on in life, to do something better with myself, so that people respect me again, so people like me again, so people want to talk to me again. That's what matters. It's good to feel confident. It's good to feel good about yourself. It's good to be liked and wanted and be respected and appreciated, and to be seen as someone that's hardworking and buoyant and resilient. And these qualities matter. They really matter, because they influence the people that are around you or want to be around you. They influence the kind of people that will be attracted to you, the kind of types, the kind of quality of friends you're more likely to connect with. You're gonna have more chances of gaining a job that you want. So all of this shit matters. It really, really does. Don't waste your lives away on superficial, shallow, hollow people and nonsense and this sense of identity that's false, that's disingenuous, that's just a projection rather than being who you truly are. You know, I think a lot of artists do that. They project a sense of their identity through collectivized ways and through this need to project something of themselves through their art. You know, and deep down they're just deeply bitter, resentful people of those who do have more of a sense of, or are more content with who they are. And I think that's part of the reason why sometimes we become the way that we become, is that we become jealous and envious and bitter because other people seem to have that. Whether that's actually the case or not, I don't know. But you know, our insecurities can destroy us. They really can. They're so fucking toxic. Insecurities. They're so damaging to your confidence. You know, and the difficulty sometimes is you can't always do anything. You can't always change things. And that is the truth. You can't always change everything about you. You're not always going to be as confident, as competent, as intellectual, as smart, as quick-witted, as funny, as attractive, etc., 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 etc. than other people. There's always going to be someone that's better than you in some way or other. But there's always going to be people that aren't as well. So, you know, I think that's important to remember when it comes to your ego, when it comes to your identity. So anyway, that's pretty much all I really want to say in this video. I think I don't want you to waste your life away. I really don't. I've done it, and man, it's really fucking hard. It really is to accept that you've wasted so much of your precious life away on excuses born out of depression, you know, excuses born out of a complete lack of hope. But you know, if you ever do find that thing that just that little flicker of hope, wherever that comes from, you better fucking cling on to it. Cling on to that fucking thing and let it guide you forward. Let it change you. Let it motivate you to something better, because it might not come around very often. Trust me. That's my advice for you. Don't blow your life away, because you only get one.